Well, joining me now is the Shadow Secretary for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, Lucy Powell. A very good morning to you, Lucy Powell. Thanks so much for talking to us. Let's talk about Sue Gray, shall we? It looks like she's going to be joining your team. It's not gone down too well with many Conservatives or the Institute of Government, actually. How appropriate is it to make that appointment?
Well, Keir has made no secret over the last few months that as we head towards the next general election, that he was looking to strengthen his team with someone who could bring experience from government and how government works in order that he and the rest of the shadow cabinet, indeed the Labour Party, could be better prepared for the eventuality of us winning that next election. Because Keir has got big ideas about how he wants to change the way in which government works. He wants to devolve huge amount of powers out to the regions and nations of the UK. He wants to reorient government to deliver on missions working with business and trade unions and civil society. These are things that have not been done for a long time, and he doesn't want to waste any time after the next election, should we win it, in trying to work out how to do that. So he's been looking for somebody with that experience, and Sue Gray, has got the reputation of being one of the very best senior civil servants of our time. And of course, her appointment will be subject, as your correspondent just said, there will be subject to the advisory committee on business appointments. And both Keir Starmer and Sue Gray have said that they will abide by the recommendations of that committee, unlike many recent cabinet ministers who also have been subject to that committee.
But allies of Boris Johnson are saying today that the Sue Gray report now looks like a left-wing stitch-up. Is it going to be hard to fight that accusation if Sir Keir makes her his chief of staff?
I think this is an utterly ludicrous suggestion. Nobody, including Boris Johnson and all of his key allies, seriously refuted or challenged the findings of that report when they came out. Indeed, quite the opposite. I think Boris Johnson said Sue Gray's report had vindicated him, and he then went on to fire a number of senior aides. Of course, the police then investigated a number of the findings and issued a large number of fines to people working in Number 10 and indeed the Prime Minister himself. And of course, at the time that Sue Gray was appointed to do this report, let's not forget that the previous person the Prime Minister had appointed had to recuse themselves because there were allegations that he had also been taking part in these parties, that the Prime Minister and all his key allies at the time lauded Sue Gray for her formidable impartiality and independence and her professionalism, and because she is a revered and of high repute civil servant in government, and they all lauded that at the time. And I think any suggestion that Sue Gray was party to some kind of conspiracy here is frankly doesn't stack up to the evidence and is for the birds.
During her time as a senior civil servant, she would have been privy to some very sensitive information, not just about policy making, but also about misdemeanours and wrongdoing when she was in a role governing ethics. So, given that she has that privileged information, is it appropriate that she then works for an opposition party who could use that information?
There is no suggestion whatsoever and no chance whatsoever of Sue Gray spilling the beans in that way. And that is not at all why she has been appointed by Keir Starmer. She has been appointed to help Keir and the Shadow Cabinet with their preparations for government, with those big ambitions we've got about changing the way the country works, to change the lives of ordinary people. Sue Gray has, of course, as a civil servant, has worked for successive governments of Labour, of Conservative colours, successive prime ministers, many of whom the recent Conservative ones, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, many of whom hated one another and had different agendas to one another. There's been no suggestion whatsoever that Sue Gray or other members of the civil service haven't acted totally properly and in confidence in those situations. And of course, her appointment will now be subject to this independent advisory body, who may well recommend a period of gardening leave, and we will abide by that, and so will Sue Gray.
And am I right in saying that the Prime Minister has the ultimate decision on this? And if that's the case, will you respect what Rishi Sunak rules?
We have said we will that Sue Gray and Keir Starmer will respect and stand by the recommendations of the advisory committee on business appointments, and there is usually a recommendation of a period of gardening leave, and I think that is something that Keir Starmer and the General Secretary of the Labour Party have taken into account, because, as I say, this appointment comes at a particular time in the cycle, as we are perhaps a year, 18 months away from the next election, and it's about somebody coming in and helping us with those preparations for government. That is a different role to the role that we have other people doing. Morgan McSweeney, our campaign director, Shabana Mahmood, our national campaign coordinator, who have over the last year or two really transformed Labour's election operations, our so-called attack and rebuttal, our digital campaigning, our communications and so on. They're responsible for that work. And actually that is quite separate in many ways from the role that Sue will be coming in, which is about making sure that if and when we win the next election, we can really hit the ground running and make the changes that we want to see at the top of government right across the country, so that we can change people's lives for the better. And that's what this is about.
I just wonder if I can ask you just one quick question. Given that you're from Manchester, you're also an MP for a Manchester constituency. I wonder what your reaction was to yesterday's report into the Manchester Arena bombing.
Well, yes, thank you. I'm obviously the MP for the Arena area, and Sir John Saunders' public inquiry has been very, very necessary, but incredibly difficult. And the third report that was out yesterday, will make very difficult reading for the families of the 22 people who lost their lives, and all those families of those who were physically or mentally injured in that attack. And as a city, our thoughts remain with them first and foremost. And it is of no comfort, really, when you read that there were serious and significant missed opportunities that were missed. It is of no comfort when people really apologise or say that they will learn the lessons. But we absolutely both must learn the lessons, we must enact those lessons and constantly review those lessons, so that whatever is necessary can happen in the future to avoid such a terrible, terrible attack as this.
Lucy Powell, we appreciate your time today. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.